plastic, the reason plastic is in here is if you make any kind of a heat thing, or you have a lot of plants and don't want to buy domes, you can make hoops and make a humidity chamber with plastic. You know, if you're buying plastic for gardening, try to buy the UV treated. It's less important inside a greenhouse, but it's still going to be, if you buy the other stuff, it's going to fall apart on you and make a mess. You know, if you're using it outside, it's a must, but that's a different talk. Okay, row cover. I use the row cover here because that big table is wasting heat if I don't have the row cover on, and really the tops of the plants are not the temperature I want in this 40-degree greenhouse if I don't have the row cover over it. You know, I have an infrared thermometer and I can check the tops of the plants before I get that over it, and it's 50. I put the cover over, come back an hour later, and it's 65 because it's holding that heat in. You know, but I really have to make hoops. I put it over last night for the first time without the domes, and they're getting too much pressure for young seedlings. You know, so that's the plastic. Shop lights. I highly recommend shop lights for small scale growers. They're really inferior to the sun, massively inferior. So what they do is get you to start and get the plants to where you can take them out on a warm day and they get the sun. You know, and whenever it's cold, they're fine under there. They may not be thriving, but they're fine. So you don't have to, like, you know, the dance. Have you ever done the dance of trying to get stuff to grow without a greenhouse, and you get the wrong night and it's colder than you thought, and you've either stunted or fried your plants? You know. Here you never worry, they go right back under the lights. It's as simple as that.
Just straight fluorescent bulb, right?
No, it's actually not just straight. And actually,
use that all full spectrum.
No, I think they're not affordable. I highly don't recommend those. You want a warm and a cool bulb in each fixture. By doing that, you get the same spectrum that you get from the grow light, or close enough. You know.
Warm and cool.
Warm and cool bulbs. Yeah, that's critical for getting good growth. You know. Also, see where they're sitting. That you don't want them any higher off the plants than that. They want to be right because they don't have the strength of the sun, right? So they want to be right there. What we would do in this situation is, as the plants grew, we'd pull the chain and raise it. I actually don't like that because these things swing and the bulbs are banging and it makes me nervous. I happened to stumble across a box of thin pieces of styrofoam right when I was having the problem of having to move these. I keep that box of styrofoam and I have my plants up here, my lights up here attached permanently. And I just put the styrofoam up to the height I want, and then as the plants grow, I pull one piece out. You know, that's my preferred way. But either way will work fine. You know, the truth is, these newer lights and the newer bulbs are more compact and less fragile, and I might not mind moving these up and down. The old ones, the big round bulbs, that may just like, ooh, they're gonna break. I don't like this, you know, because they can swing pretty wildly when you're moving them. That's it. The innovation that I want to show you here. Mylar is way better. But this would do it. And the innovation is simply, and it doesn't much matter now because the plants are right low to the lights, but as the lights get taller, some kind of reflective thing around your grow thing, you know, like that, will give you way more light. You know. And by the way, capture the heat from the lights and give you some warmth too. You know. So you wouldn't have to build a thing. You could set up a table, get those cheap little space blankets and use them to go over your whole structure, and you make yourself an incredible grow chamber, you know.
So you got little guys hanging out here on the end here that aren't getting the same
light
level. Is
that's the fault of this table. But I actually was able to tweak it. See how I have this one here and that one there?
Oh, okay.
I looked at it last night and they were all getting the same light.
Okay.
Especially this row here was catching that little bit of reflection from this and it was working, you know. I always want to reiterate, ground fault, right? Water and electricity don't mix, you know. Pay attention, you know. Timers. Simple household timer if you're doing just one of these. I found at Highland Lake when I had a whole stack of them, those timers are getting pretty hot. I went to, you know, industrial scale timers. Don't overload the timer. You don't set it for 16 hours or something like that you think the plants would like the most. You set it for like 22. They like a little bit of a break, but they'll just grow better. It's like they're in Alaska, you know. You know, you can get maximum light out of it, and since you're not out in the sun, you might as well. And then the other thing, lettuce less so, but these guys here are these guys here. Whenever you just come through and do this, right? And that creates the experience of wind and makes a much tougher plant. Otherwise, they're going to be these real leggy, you know, weak, hothouse kind of plants, you know? Okay, watering methods. Watering methods are very careful when you're using lights, right? I can't say that enough, right? Okay? You might actually, if you're just doing a few, want to pull your flat out and lay it someplace to water it, you know? If not, you might be happy to use something like this that can be very precise and just water a row carefully, you know, or just a few rows. it's very easy to make a mess because you really don't want to water so that it doesn't come through. If you're trying to be careful enough to water so it doesn't come through, it's not going to be too long before you have salt buildup. You're going to see white on top of your soil, and your plants are going to start looking bad. You have to flush through because water is full of salts. If you use distilled water, you could water it so it didn't go through. But if you're not using distilled water, which I do not recommend, you probably have to at least every few water. Now you're going to work, you don't have time to take your plants out, right? But they need water. You can come through and carefully water them so it doesn't come through, and it'd be fine, But then next time you water it, flush it. Don't do that too many times because you will get that salt buildup.
Yeah.
It depends on where you are, where your situation is. That's why.
Yeah, but the best is let it drip.
Amen.
All right.
Absolutely. The best practice, flush through every time.
All right.
Don't water too often, but water really well. If you see one cell just starting to dry out, that's about the perfect time to water. Ideally, you'll start the plants, indoors and not put them out the first time, or in a greenhouse. Obviously, indoors is if you don't have a greenhouse, and not put them out the first time in the wind or the sun until a weekend when you can be home and watch them and learn the rhythm. But if you've got tiny seedlings or you're using soil blocks, and we can touch on soil blocks if you want, you might actually, when you're first starting out, use a mister. Because let's say you're doing foxglove seed or something like that, they want to be on the surface. They don't want to be buried, but they're tiny. So if you hit it with this, they're going all over the place. They're just going to float all over the place. But if you got a mister, you can soak them well. You wet the soil you're planting in first, so you don't have to soak them with a mister. That'd take a long time. But then you can keep them moist with a mister. I also recommend for that small stuff, top any plants that don't need to be in the dark. Like onion seed must be in the dark to germinate, right? But lettuce is happier to get light, right? So I like to top my lettuce not with soil, but with vermiculite. And then likewise, you can put a little bit more vermiculite on top of the foxglove. It'll still come up. Foxglove is one example, but we've all run into tiny seed. And so you got to have those kind of watering methods figured out. Also, once in a while, if you haven't got the great McEnroe potting soil, it's probably best practice to water from the bottom with a fish emulsion mix. Just a standard 2 tablespoons of fish emulsion or fish seaweed in some kind of a container that holds water. Set the whole flat in and let it soak it up. Let the plants be pretty dry before you do it. And that'll make up for the fact that you don't have 40-some% compost. You can certainly grow plants without McEnroe. I choose not to, but you don't need McEnroe. But you have to then do other things to make it work. Okay. Timing. For the early stuff, onions, flowers, and herbs that take a long time, we start them as close to January 1st as we could. I wish I started some of them in December. Then sometime towards the middle of December, we started our early collards. That's what you're looking at right there. Actually those were started in the beginning of January. Collards, kale, chard, things like that, greens, salad greens, and we'll do successions from now on. We didn't start the beets till later, because we want to put them out at 5 to 6 weeks at the end of March. So we started them about mid-February. There's some things that make sense. You think, oh, it's cool loving, I should start my fennel, my Chinese cabbage now, right? You don't, because of vernalizing. It means that the plants have experienced what they consider to be winter. Whatever light condition triggers flowering for them, if they've experienced winter, they're going to go to seed. So if you try and start celery, fennel, Chinese cabbage in a cold situation, let's say you start them inside, it's nice and warm, but you want them to get more light, so you put them out on 40-degree days when it's sunny. They can take it. You think they're fine, right? You're hardening them off. They get a week or so of that, and a lot of them are going to bolt because they've experienced winter, and as the days get longer, bang, they're going to bolt. So you have to take vernalization into consideration.
So you have to start things later than you would normally.
Some things, Chinese cabbage and celery, yeah, are prepared to have them in pots for a long time. You want them to go. You don't, and it's not like 50 degrees one night will do it. It's around 50, maybe slightly below 50 for about a week. And the thing is, there isn't, that I know of, a great source for specific information on that. You pick up snatches of it here and there, like Johnny's will mention it about Chinese cabbage. Somebody else will mention it about fennel, So you just, and the ones that I'm aware of, there are probably other ones that I still wonder why they're bolting on me too much.
Well, bok choy, isn't it?
Bok choy. Bok choy will do that too, yeah. They vernalize, particularly it's fall, right? They get some good cold. As soon as the days start getting long after solstice, every last one of them pops. That's just the way they work. So just beware of that. That's one of those things that'll trick your timing, is that vernalization factor. Other thing to know, lettuce somewhat is affected by that, but not when it's tiny. If it has less than 4 leaves, it can freeze and freeze and freeze, and it will not bulk quicker because it got cold. Once it gets bigger, then if it gets too much cold, it's going to bulk quicker. Warm weather crops. I kind of talked about this already, but it's really a big mistake, right? To be all excited. Boy, did I used to do this all the time. First gorgeous day in February, start all my tomatoes and peppers and stuff. You know, it's like, where am I going to put them? You know, I live in North Carolina. You know, I mean tomatoes. I mean peppers and eggplant. If you're savvy, you're not putting them out till at least the 3rd week in May. You know, February to the 3rd week of May. That's a lot of months. You know, so now I just try and back off. I think, you know, when really I feel safer putting those guys out the 1st week in June. So I think, okay, the most I'm going to want to give them is 8 weeks. So I think, okay, I'm starting at the beginning of April. You know, I'm not, even though I'm dying to get them going and I love seeing them up, we won't start the ones that are going outside until the beginning of April. Tomatoes, they can take a little more cold. I'd say middle of March is when I think that, you know, for the early ones. But I'll probably start a second succession beginning of April. Because I'm not going to get them all out, and then if we have a really terrible spring, the early ones are going to be really stunted. So then I got my main crop that I start at the beginning of April. You know.
So tomatoes, you plant the seedlings in mid-March? Like
yeah, I start the seeds in mid-March, yeah. And I recommend that you start another batch in the beginning of April because we can have some really funky springs, you know. And if it's really, really cold, everybody's going to suffer. And so it just makes sense to me. And the truth is, eggplant I might consider starting a little earlier if I knew I was going to step them up to big pots, you know. So I might start them the middle of March because I'm guaranteeing myself I'm not going to let them sit in that 4-pack, you know, waiting to go in the ground at the beginning of June because they'll be stunted. But I'm going to definitely sometime in early May put them in a 4-inch pot. And then they're going to be gorgeous when they go out, you know. So that's the only reason I might start those guys a little earlier, is if I know I'm going to step them up. I don't think peppers need it. If you have nice, really nice looking 4-inch, you know, 4-pack peppers, they're going to do great, you know. And indeed, you can do 72s and they work good enough, you know, or 48s rather, and they work good enough, but I prefer 4-packs for those. And I think they're a must for eggplant because of the flea beetle thing. You know, I just don't think you should bother to use a smaller cell than a 4-pack for eggplant. And if you can possibly do a 4-incher, do it. Fall crops, it's really confusing to people about when to start fall crops because lots of people think I start fall crops close to fall. And no, you don't start fall crops close to fall because then you'll have a winter garden. You start fall crops actually in late spring, you know. So in June is the best time to be starting things like kale, collards, not chard as much, it's faster, but broccoli, the long season cauliflowers, those kinds of things. They're going to do best now. And Brussels sprouts, best Brussels sprouts I ever grew, I accidentally started them because I had the seed mixed up in mid-May. And I couldn't believe how gorgeous they were. Once I figured out they were Brussels sprouts, before they made a single sprout, the plant was that tall, you know. And they just made huge Brussels sprouts and did really well. I never do that because I got too much else going on. It has to be an accident, you know. But if I didn't have enough time, I would start them in mid-May. I think it's really best practice to start them by mid-June. And I think if you're starting them later than early July, let's see if you can buy them from somebody that started them sooner.
So you got to have that, when you start those kind of crops, then you got to have them fairly large.
Yeah, you're going to step them up to probably at least the 48s.
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
At least the 48s, and it won't hurt.
They're going to be there a little longer.
They're going to take a little while. Yeah, they're going to go. I would put those guys out in early August. You know, so if you're starting them by mid-June, they're still getting 6 weeks. You know, but you might not get to them. It might be so brutally hot that you'd rather leave them in a cooler place, and then it'd be better to have them bigger. You know, that really is a bit of a gamble with the weather. But if you get a cool, rainy week or two in, you know, very late July, early August, is a fine time to put them out. They will suffer, you know, but they'll come out of it.
What about timing for? I'm starting a rooftop garden. So would the timing be the same, or if they're just going in garden?
It's going to be a little hotter, probably.
Okay.
You know, there was a great, it's off topic, but I'll say it fast. A great article in Growing for Market newsletter about people who did rooftop gardens for a restaurant in Portland, and what they did was they used swimming pools, right, that they filled with perlite on the bottom, and they had compost, nothing but compost in the top. They grew in that, so it was very rich. And they didn't put their drainage holes on the bottom. They put them right above the perlite.
Okay.
So that, because you're going to have major drying out issues on a rooftop, right? But these plants had a constant reservoir of water in the perlite that they could go to. But they didn't. The roots weren't stuck in it. The roots kind of just went down in there when they wanted to. They had the drainage, you know, and they drank from that perlite, but they didn't get waterlogged.
So it was just perlite and then compost?
Perlite and then compost on top, yeah. And they used kids' pools, and they were very successful. The last thing that I didn't cover that I covered before the resources is there are times in certain kinds of plants that it's just never worth trying to use seed. Do vegetative propagation. You take cuttings from other people's plants. Lavender, rosemary. Anybody ever try to start those guys? You seed a flat of lavender or rosemary and you get like, what, 10% germination if you're doing good, you know? Stevia is another one, you know? They just have terrible germination. So if you see on some catalogs are honest and tell you that, they won't say terrible, they say germination can be erratic. That means terrible. You know? If you see that,
rosemary.
think if you know, right, think if you know somebody that has a plant already, and you can get some cuttings. So that really is the outline of what we're doing. That's the talk part, except for the resources. And what I'd say is, you know, it's going to get cool in here later on. Let's do stuff, and we'll come back and do the resources at the end.